CJSW's funding drive is on right now. Head over to CJSW.com to show your support for this program. CJSW 90.9 FM. Broadcast in Bloom.
But the day doesn't start till you've tuned into CJSW 90.9 FM, broadcasting out of Calgary, Alberta.
Hello, CJSW listeners. My name is Emily, and I'm here with my co-host, Amanda. We're both second-year law students here at the University of Calgary, and we're here to represent the Hearsay podcast.
To give a small introduction, the Hearsay podcast is a joint project between Pro Bono Students Canada, the University of Calgary chapter, and CJSW. Pro Bono Students Canada is the largest national volunteer organization that provides free legal services in the form of public legal education, client intake, and assistance, as well as legal research and writing.
The Hearsay podcast is a 30-minute legal education podcast hosted by law student volunteers like us that airs on CJSW every month. The Hearsay podcast is also available on the CJSW website, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Our podcast discusses a variety of legal topics. So, for example, our most recent episodes focus on understanding Canada's and Alberta's judicial systems with Justice Paul Jeffrey, who's a judge on the Alberta Court of King's Bench.
Since our podcast is made for you, the public, we're always open to topic suggestions. So, if you have any areas of law or issues you'd like us to discuss, please email us at hearsaypodcastufc@gmail.com.
So before we dive into the content we've prepared for you all today, we'd like to thank CJSW for inviting us to join them on their 2022 funding drive broadcast in Bloom. CJSW is a student-run radio station right here on the University of Calgary campus. And just like how the Hearsay podcast wouldn't be able to deliver its content without them, CJSW wouldn't be very operational without its listeners. So we encourage you to donate through cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 during this funding drive week. The drive wraps up this Friday, October 28th at 6 p.m., so we encourage you to donate.
Without further ado, we'll head right into the discussion part of our broadcast today. Essentially, we've planned a sort of meet the people behind Hearsay sort of deal, so not only can listeners get to know who we are, but also to learn about getting into law school and how that was for us, and what it means to be a University of Calgary law student. Emily, would you like to start us off?
Yes, of course. So essentially, I grew a taste for law growing up because my parents are immigrants and there was this really large language barrier. So I grew up translating all these legal documents and government documents that I honestly had no idea what they meant, but I just translated it because that was my duty as the only child. But I essentially took a taste to it and I really wanted to learn more. So I took law courses in high school. I was a bit of a nerd and I did like an overnight law camp at the University of Toronto. And, the lawyers there encouraged me to just try different things in my undergraduate career instead of studying things like, law and politics and the typical undergrad for law students. So I tried different things. I tried like an undergrad in environmental studies and urban studies and just explored my horizons a bit. But then I still figured that law was something I wanted to do. So I decided to come to Calgary. I'm originally from Ontario, so coming to Calgary I think was a really good choice because I was drawn to the smaller class sizes, the focus on practical skills for the curriculum, and yeah, I do not regret.
And I'm really glad that you came to Calgary because I met you.
Oh,
and you're
thank
sitting right
you.
beside me doing this.
How sweet.
So, it's really interesting because I have quite of a similar background as you. My parents were also immigrants. I also had to translate a lot of legal documents from elementary school that I, didn't really understand. But instead of growing an interest in law and what these documents are, I actually developed some anxiety around it. What are these? What happens if I mess it up? And all these thoughts. So I actually didn't want to go to law school for the longest time. So, and my background is slightly different from yours in the sense that mine was a bit more chaotic than yours, I think. I didn't actually think of going to law school until quite late in my undergraduate degree. So my background is in philosophy and psychology, and I really wanted to do psychology at first and then philosophy in graduate school, but the pandemic hit, and it turns out it just wasn't the best idea to pursue philosophy graduate school in the middle of the pandemic. So I started really thinking about, like, what can I do as a career that allows me to ask questions, the why questions, and why are things like this, and also do research that I really enjoyed in psychology as well as philosophy. And there were many answers, but one of the most prominent answers was law. And actually, the event that planted the seed of maybe law school might be the idea was several years ago. I attended the annual general meeting of Amnesty International Canada branch, and a lot of people on the board, as well as just volunteers, a lot of them had law background, and they were just the coolest people I've seen. Just giving, with their expertise in law, they could really leverage the expertise, the power, the knowledge, and the connections they had to make amazing differences in relation to human rights in Canada and abroad. So I think that was perhaps one of the important events.
Grass is green, and you know what else is green? It grows on trees. Money. So donate it now. CJSW.com/donate.
So we kind of given a brief introduction and a look into how, and kind of, I guess, why we went into law school, but I don't know, personally, before I got into law school, it was such a strange thing for me. It felt almost alien and mythical. So I don't know, Amanda, how does one get into law school?
Very good question. And the short answer is it really depends. It depends on the school you're applying to and what admission category you're planning on getting into. So for the general category, which most students apply under, typically, the category requires that the applicant submit an LSAT score, all post-secondary transcripts, statement of interest, and other personal information like employment history and special facts. And some schools also require references. And previously, I mentioned that my undergraduate background is philosophy and psychology, and many students interested in law school ask me what degree should they choose if they want to get into law school or to maximize their chance of getting into law school. And I love giving this answer, which is you can do whatever you want. Many people in our class are from political science and history, but I have many friends whose backgrounds are not in that typical poli-sci history, the humanities background. So, for instance, I have friends whose background is in archaeology, biology, like engineering, and music.
Yeah, speaking of music, I remember one of the lawyers I spoke to when I went to that overnight law camp, they actually had an undergrad in drama. So, I don't know, that shocked me to my core because as someone who grew up, loving music and, my childhood dream was to be a singer and all of that, it really surprised me that I was speaking to a lawyer who actually had such a creative background. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't actually know. But, so I guess to kind of educate everyone a little more, the LSAT is essentially the law school admission test. And bear with me as I kind of go through what it is, because I feel like a lot of people think, LSAT, MCAT, all these standardized tests. We don't really know what they actually are. So to kind of give a brief overview of what this test actually is, it's a standardized test that's made up of two parts. So there's the 4 sections of multiple choice that are about 35 minutes each, and then there's a 35-minute unscored writing sample. So for the multiple choice sections, there are essentially 3 question types that these sections can essentially be. That is reading comprehension, analytical reasoning, or as we would all fondly refer to as logic games, and logic reasoning. So within these 4 multiple choice sections, since there's only 3 types of questions, only 3 out of the 4 sections contribute to your actual score. So the 4th section can be any one of the other 3 question types, but it is unscored. The writing sample is just a decision problem where you'll be asked to choose between 2 different positions or courses of actions and then defend your choice. So you'll be kind of given a scenario essentially, and then they'll be like, okay, so person A has this, person B has this. These are their situations, to defend one of them and explain why, or you can defend both and also explain why, or defend neither. It's not really like a right or wrong kind of thing. It's more just for the law schools that you're applying to kind of see, what your persuasive writing skills look like. So, that way they'll be able to make an accurate judgment as to whether or not you'll be a good lawyer. But if you do go to the Law School Admission Council website, you'll find everything you need to know about the test there. So, Amanda, do you kind of want to talk about, how you study for the LSAT?
Well, for me, I spent, I think, about 2 months studying, a couple hours every day, and closer to the date of the exam, I spent, more hours reviewing, doing practice tests. But truthfully, maybe it's just my brain trying to block out the traumatic experience of studying for the LSAT, but I actually don't remember that much. But what I can say is it really helps to do a lot of practice tests. Mm-hmm. Just knowing where you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, really helps. So for me, I was pretty proficient at logic games. It was quite fun to figure out, Sally's sitting on this table, but Drew, he has to sit right beside Sally. But Marco doesn't like either of them, so he has to sit on the other side of the table. What's the makeup of the table?
And we're being serious. This is exactly what the fact patterns sound like. They're like, this is what the law test actually looks like. So.
Yeah, so I didn't love them because it's part of a test, but it was relatively more fun. But my weakest area was reading comprehension.
Oh, same.
Just reading passages after passages of a topic that sometimes were interesting. Like I think I legitimately read a topic on quantum physics. I'm like, I didn't know about this. This is pretty interesting. But there were a lot of art history and a lot of history, in general, issues that I frankly didn't really care about. So getting through them and actually, trying to answer these questions were pretty difficult.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Yeah, because my background is basically in social sciences. And I say social sciences, but it's very theoretical. So anytime they started talking about biology or physics, it just went way over my head. And it was very difficult for me to read the content and absorb it and then answer questions of back in paragraph 2, what does this specific sentence mean? And I'm like, I don't know.
I remember
Do I actually know? But yeah, studying for me was a little different actually, because essentially it took me 2 whole years to kind of get a score that I was happy with. So I essentially took 2 years off of school after my undergrad to just focus on, paying back my student debts and, work 3 part-time jobs and then study for the LSAT. And I think what students who are interested in going into law school don't realize is that studying for the test can look very different depending on who it is you talk to and, what kind of a person you are, because everyone just has very different studying styles. So, for example, I wasn't able to afford long hours of tutoring, so I had to do a lot of self-studying through textbooks, online videos, kind of, as the kids say, jank. But as for advice on, those of you who are interested in studying for the LSAT, I just say experiment around a bit until you find what's best for you. Do you like learning through books, through reading? Do you like watching videos? Do you like when someone teaches you the materials individually, or do you like learning in a class environment? It just looks very different for every person.
Yeah, and I'd like to chip in by saying one thing I did that was very different from everyone I talked to was that I didn't take a diagnostic test. I knew I sucked. So why would I want to slap a terrible number on my face and just be reminded that I'm bad at this test that I've never taken? And for me, over the years of, taking numerous tests, I knew that doing an initial diagnostic doesn't serve me that well. It just brings me down. It just stresses me out because I could clearly see the way the long journey I have to take, even though I know it. So I didn't take it, but here I am. I got into law school. So
here we are.
So of course, talk to people who have taken the LSAT and, did well, didn't do too well, just, to see how their own experiences are. But of course, take it with a grain of salt because they have their own studying habits, the strategies that work for them, but you're different.
Exactly. And speaking of affordability, we just like to take this moment to remind our listeners to donate to CJSW's funding drive and why it's so important. The dollars you donate directly support the upkeep and maintenance of the station, and without your help, CJSW would be operating at a majorly reduced capacity and wouldn't be able to broadcast at the standard you've come to know and depend on. So with the help of your funding drive dollars, CJSW can continually offer new and unique volunteer opportunities that provide education and technical skills such as DJ workshops, live session teching, video editing, graphic design, music reviews, and of course, on-air programming. So again, without CJSW, the Hearsay podcast wouldn't be able to get our legal education episodes aired as well. So we owe a lot to the station, and we encourage you to donate. So we briefly talked about how we got into law school. Amanda, what are some of the things that have changed in your life ever since you got into the actual law school?
Everything, as I jokingly say. But to be honest, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Calgary, so the everyday life has not changed significantly. I guess the main difference would be that I now walk to the law building instead of the social science building on campus. I still go to Mac Hall to get my lunches sometimes when I haven't packed them. I still take the same buses, but physically that'd be a main difference. But I definitely notice some differences in terms of how I view the world around me. So for instance, one of the major changes for me is that I'm not as scared of looking at laws. So to give an example, as an immigrant, immigration law is terrifying. And it was especially terrifying when I was younger. I didn't know how the laws worked. I was not proficient in English. So whenever I got a form or some kind of document where it mentioned some kind of a law, I immediately got terrified and just didn't really know what to do. But thankfully, now that I'm taking law courses, and to be frank, I'm not even taking immigration law, but over last year and a couple of months of just reading statutes and case law, now I know that I can tackle this. I can tackle a piece of law, a piece of regulation that I've never seen before because I know how it generally works. And, as everyone's favorite topic to talk about, paying taxes. When I first had to write my tax return, I was terrified. What am I doing? What is, all these questions based off of? What happens if I get it wrong? But thankfully I'm taking the basic tax course right now, and the income tax law isn't easy. It's really complicated, very niche, very nuanced. So I will never say that I'm comfortable reading the Income Tax Act, but I have it in my room. I can open up a section. I know I have it in my room. But I can open up a section, and if someone asks me, hey, what is this section talking about? If I have a business, I wouldn't answer that question because I'm a law student, so I can't give legal advice. But I might be able to open up the act and read it to them and say, hey, maybe this means this. But ultimately, I can direct you to the resources you can go to. But it's a good starting point. I think it's all about the attitude. I'm just not as scared about tackling law. Mm-hmm. And I always say this to, kind of as a joke, but not really. But whenever I cross a road, I always press the pedestrian button because, what if I get hit by a car and I have to argue that it wasn't my fault? The opposing side might go like, but did you press the button?
Are you saying you never pressed the button before law school?
No, I did. No, I of course I did. But, I feel a bit more pressure, the need to press it just in case I get hit by a car.
That legal pressure.
Exactly.
That legal liability.
Exactly. I have to cover all my grounds.
No, exactly. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I thought of that before I even came into law school. But I don't think that's my law student self-talking. That's just my anxiety. Yeah, like for me, kind of how I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from Ontario. So moving over from Ontario over to Alberta was a big change, like a big physical change, because I've never actually lived in a different province before. I've never even moved out of my parents' home just because it was so convenient for me to stay in there. But I think the biggest difference for me that I've kind of realized is that people kind of look at you differently. And I can't tell if I like it or not. So I think a lot of people still think law school and the legal profession is that, stereotypical Law and Order, Suits, Harvey Specter, spectacle that we see on TV. So whenever I tell people that I'm in law school, most of the time you can kind of see their eyes light up and, they look at you differently. And it's like, oh, you're in law school. And the oohing and awing kind of continues and all the questions and can you give me legal advice and the prodding and, I have to explain to them that I can't. But so like part of me feels a lot of pride in being a law student, because it's a big privilege to, first of all, be in school and then secondly to even be in law school of all places and to eventually and hopefully become like a licensed lawyer. But then there's that constant pressure of needing to do well as a law student, and everyone kind of looks at you with their hopes and imaginations and expectations, and all of a sudden you're like, well, this stranger that I talked to 5 days ago knows that I'm a law student, and, I can't screw it up because then I've disappointed this one individual that I don't really know.
No, exactly, and I think the pressure intensifies to some extent if you are from an immigrant family.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're both only children, so I feel like we feel that even more just knowing, our parents are kind of they say they're not, but I think just having that expectation growing up is a lot.
Yeah, and I do sometimes get texts saying, oh, what is this? What is this document?
Oh, yeah.
What is this court-related thing? And I'm like, sure, I can take a look at it, but I can half guarantee you that I also don't know, and I would need some hours of researching to give you a good answer.
Yeah.
Actually, your answer just I remembered something kind of on the lighter side. As soon as I got into law school, people asked me, hey, do you like this blank law TV show or movie? I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know, like to some extent, yes, I do, because I understand more of what's happening. It could be, I understand a little bit of what this legal area they're practicing in, or, I kind of understand the process the characters are in. Are they in court? Are they preparing for court? Are they negotiating? But, I understand that, so that's good. But I think I feel a bit stronger. There's more frustration that I feel when I see these law shows, because a lot of them portray the litigation side where, the lawyers go to court, they argue, but in one episode or, within 2 episodes, these characters see their clients for the first time and then they go to court. And like in Canada, it's just so unrealistic because, now the courts are so backlogged that you have to book court dates like 2 years later. So I see these episodes. I'm like, this is so unrealistic.
Well, they're not going to have, 5 episodes of preparing for court, are they?
And waiting.
And
just
waiting.
corresponding with the client. Hey, sorry, we're still waiting. I know.
It'd be a very boring show if that was the case.
I know, but knowing the reality of it and that everyone is just waiting, I can't just, put a smile on my face and be like, yes, I love it.
Oh, for sure. Like I watch Suits, right? For example, I think that was something that really got popular, like 1 or 2 years before the pandemic, whenever it came out. And I remember watching it, and I didn't know what being a lawyer meant at the time. I didn't know what law school was like at the time, and I still knew it was, not unrealistic, but they're just really good at capturing your attention. And sometimes I'm sitting in class being like, man, what if law school and being a lawyer was like this? What if lawyers could just march into each other's office and, be aggressive at each other the way they are in the show? But then I realized, no, that's actually a terrible idea. Please don't do that. There's a high level of professionalism that needs to be kept.
And civility, especially in this profession. Especially in litigation, where it's an adversarial system. You are trying to win an argument to some extent, of course, and because it's very tense, you have to be civil, you have to be professional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like all the lawyers are handling very, sensitive materials, and there's a lot of high stakes. And I don't know, I've been really impressed speaking with the lawyers that I have, and just getting to know, how they maneuver around these difficult situations, and how they're able to be so courteous and humble to, their colleagues, even at like the opposing side. And I don't know, I think it's really heartwarming. It's a lot more wholesome than the shows, portray them to be.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. But to give everyone a bit of idea of what our first year of law school was like, essentially we have all mandatory classes at the University of Calgary. So there's legislation, there's torts, which is essentially like a broader way of describing civil law cases. Like, I don't know, if someone slipped on your sidewalk, what would you do? There's property, crime, contracts, and constitution. And these are all mandatory. They're all set schedules, so we don't really have a choice as to when and who we're taking these all with. And all of the entire first year class was split into 3 sections. So there's about 130 of us around the time, and we were all split into 3 different sections. And Amanda was with me in every class except for 1. So I think that gave us a chance for our friendship to blossom.
And I was very lonely in that one class I was on with you.
Yeah, you kind of bond with your classmates in the sections. And then, as I was doing all of those mandatory classes, I was able to join a lot of really cool clubs that the school has. So, for example, I was in the Environmental Law Society. I was in the Moot Times, which is our, law student-run magazine. I was part of the Intellectual Property Club, where I wrote this little blog for them. And I was also a law ambassador. So if anyone from outside of the school had questions about what law school was like, I'd be able to just connect with them and give them some insight.
Mm-hmm. And because Emily already spoke about classes, which is all mandatory, you don't get a choice, I'll chip in regarding the extracurricular activities I was involved in last year. So I volunteered with the Hearsay podcast last year, and this is my year 2 continuing as a project leader, and I'm so glad I chose Hearsay podcast. I was involved with creating 2 episodes on labor and employment law generally. So the specific topic was workplace accommodations in the middle of the pandemic. See, I wasn't taking labor and employment law at the time, so it was such a great way for me to learn more about the area and see if I was interested. And I got to interview 2 amazing people. One is a Professor Hardcastle, who teaches health law and torts at the University of Calgary. She was such a phenomenal speaker. I mean, she does interviews all the time. She's a rock star in terms of media and communication. So she gave such good, succinct information digestible to the public about, generally what the impact of COVID in the workplace. And the second person I got to interview was my mentor provided by the Canadian Bar Association. She's a lawyer working in a labor and employment boutique, and it was such a wonderful interview. Like, I love, just an aside, I love interviewing lawyers and Crown's judges, like legal professionals, because they're such great speakers.
I know. Sometimes I wonder, am I going to be able to get to that level where I'm able to speak clearly and succinctly and not freak out about ifs, ands, and buts and ums,
and not ramble like I am right now. But and there were other topics that other volunteers got to be involved in, like human rights, Landlord Tenancy Act, and just listening to all these cool episodes. It was such an eye-opening experience for me because, as I said, I wasn't going into law school was not my lifelong dream, so I didn't actually know too much about law and the different areas of law. And so being involved in the Hearsay podcast was one of the biggest involvements outside of class. And with Emily, I was also involved with the Environmental Law Society, and as well as Business Law Association. And similar to Emily, my goal was to explore as many areas as possible. And the clubs I mentioned, I was serving an executive position. I was volunteering with the club, but outside of that, I was a member of, I believe, almost every club on a law club.
And there's a lot of them.
And there's a lot of them. Like Emily, you mentioned IP. There's Labor and Employment Club. There's
sports entertainment.
Exactly. Like Energy Club, Energy Law Club, and just to see what my options are. And I didn't know what I was interested in, and maybe attending one of the club events will open my eyes to the fascinating area. So.
CJSW's 2022 Broadcast in Bloom funding drive is live. With a $30 donation, you'll receive our CJSW Friends Card, a discount card with over 150 of Calgary's finest local businesses. Satisfy your need for a feed. Plant yourself down at one of our friends' restaurants and eateries like Boogie's Burgers, Native Tongues, The Eden, or simply I Read, just to name a few. Visit cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 to get your own and start saving.
CJSW's 2022 funding drive has taken root and is open for business. This means you need to get ready for our 2022 Garden of Earthly Delights funding drive wrap-up Halloween party. Taking place Saturday, October 29th at the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 1 at 116 7th Ave Southeast. Brought to you by Village Brewery, Sled Island, and of course CJSW. There will be 3 floors of DJs, live music, karaoke, and more. Tickets are $25 in advance, and you can get yours now at showpass.com. This party always sells out, so talk to your friends, plan a costume, and grab tickets early.
Welcome back to Meeting the People Behind the Hearsay podcast. So for those of you just joining us, my name is Emily, and I'm joined with my co-host and fellow project leader, Amanda. So as a reintroduction, the Hearsay podcast is a joint project between Pro Bono Students Canada, the University of Calgary chapter, and CJSW. So Pro Bono Students Canada is the largest national volunteer organization that provides free legal services in the form of public legal education, client intake and assistance, and legal research and writing. The Hearsay podcast is a 30-minute legal education podcast hosted by law student volunteers like us that airs on CJSW every month. We'd like to thank CJSW for inviting us to join them on their 2022 funding drive, Broadcast in Bloom. CJSW is a student-run radio station right here on the University of Calgary campus, and just like how the Hearsay podcast wouldn't be able to deliver its content without them, CJSW wouldn't be very operational without its listeners. So we encourage you to donate through cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 during this funding drive week. The drive wraps up this Friday, October 28th at 6 p.m. We're currently at I can't read my numbers, 91,641 and 77 cents. So we're almost at the 100,000 mark, and every little bit helps. So we encourage you to donate. Again, it's cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000.
We've talked a little bit about first year and before law school. And, let's move chronologically. Let's talk about what we're doing now in second year.
Yeah, so I'm definitely involved in a lot less. Actually, I can't say that. I'm involved in a little more extracurriculars this year. I think I'm in 7 different volunteer positions. But I guess essentially, I'm part of PBSC. I am part of the Environmental Law Society. I'm part of the Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers as part of the student committee. I'm still an online content creator and online. What is even my title? Online content creator, sure, of the Moot Times. I just upload the materials onto the website that we have. What else am I part of? I'm still a law ambassador. I'm an executive on it now. And my roles have just kind of evolved over time. I feel like I'm still involved very heavily in a lot of the organizations I was part of last year, but I've just advanced more into the roles that I'm in now. And yeah, I don't know. What about you, Amanda?
Well, before I, say my less impressive list of extracurriculars, I would just like to note that I think you have a time turner. I don't understand how you do all this. What are you on? Or are you do you legitimately have a time turn? Just going back in time?
I really wish I did. Honestly, that would have saved me so much trouble. If I could go back in time every once in a while and just, go through my classes again, do my readings on time, actually, try not to fall asleep in class because I'm so sleep deprived. I think that'd be very useful. But no, I think I'm just anxious to get things done.
And really, so if you had a time turner, you would not retake your exams. You did not mention that. I'm surprised, because I would.
Why? Why would you go through that pressure again?
Well, but now I know the exam questions.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some level of questionable academic integrity thing over there.
Oh, that is true. Okay, yeah, but you going back to your classes? Okay, maybe not. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not writing about it.
Well, good thing that I don't have a time turner.
Good thing.
So, for me, I think I'm quite similar to Emily in the sense that I am continuing with most of the extracurricular activities I got involved last year, and my roles just have evolved. So I'm still part of the Environmental Law Society. Last year, I was a first-year representative helping out with the executives. But this year, thankfully, got to be the president. So I'm overseeing the entire club. As well as everyone's listening, I'm still part of the Hearsay podcast. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of it. And last year I was a first-year volunteer creating the content. But this year I'm one of the project leaders, so I'm taking more of a managerial role, I guess. Comes with both pros and cons, but still part of it, and I hope to be part of it next year as well. And same with Emily, I'm also part of the Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers. I'm head of the student committee, and we represent Asian Canadian lawyers in Western Canada, so that includes Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and all of the territories. And those are the things that have continued on from last year. But this year, I'm so excited that I got to try out a new activity, which is volunteering at the Student Legal Assistance. So Student Legal Assistance is a pro bono legal clinic that provides legal information and representation to low-income residents of Calgary and the surrounding area. Student Legal Assistance has been operating since 1979. Gosh, every time I see that number, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is old. And this program staffed primarily by current University of Calgary law student caseworkers just like me. So for me, it's only been a couple months since I started in September, but so far it's been incredibly educational and rewarding. I've got to meet clients, hear their stories, and work with advising lawyers to figure out this legal issue. And I can really feel that I'm making a difference in their life. I don't know how big the size of the difference is, but knowing that there is a legal problem, and like, it's stressful. It's a big problem, especially if you're a student or earning low income. It's a huge barrier to live, to you living an everyday, normal life. So it's incredibly rewarding and it means a lot to me that I have this privilege, that I have the resources to help out people. And I'm very glad that I started this. And a quick pitch is, if you are a University of Calgary student or from a low-income household and cannot afford the services of a lawyer, please reach out to Student Legal Assistance. We can provide legal representation and services in several areas, including criminal, civil, family, landlord and tenant matters, as well as traffic and bylaw matters.
Are you sure you don't have a time turner? You're just as busy as I am.
Well, lack of sleep. No, that's a joke.
No, it's not. It is not.
I tend to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep every day, so I can't really lie about that. But
wow.
I'd say multitasking.
Okay.
That is becoming a forte of mine.
Write that on your resume, huh?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do.
I was going to say, I really wish we could put kind of like mundane skills onto our resume instead of, here's the job that I worked at for so-and-so years. Like, can I put, I don't know, like you multitask. Can we put multitasking and building IKEA furniture on our resume, please? I think that's pretty impressive. Like, I moved out of the student dormitories, after my first year of law school. And since my family is in here, I literally single-handedly built every single IKEA furniture in my house because I just had to. And not everyone likes to do that. I actually enjoyed it, so I can't really say much.
To do that. No.
Yeah, I actually like building it. It's kind of like adult Legos, but a lot larger. Actually, they have adult Legos now, so I maybe there's just something wrong with me. I don't know. But I personally really liked it, and I'm kind of sad we can't put that on our resume.
I mean, yes, technically you can. You just put that under interest.
Under my interest, I like building IKEA furniture in my spare time.
Yes, that talks about your independence, your problem solving, follow instructions. Now, this is what law school does to you.
Wow, you know what? You're right. You're right. Maybe I should do that. But yeah, like you spoke about SLA, so I'm just going to do a little pitch for PBSC. I'm personally a huge supporter of access to justice and legal education since, as you know, growing up with immigrant parents and being of low socioeconomic status meant we were either completely unaware or misinformed about all things law. So being involved with Pro Bono Students Canada and the Hearsay podcast really satisfies that part of it for me. For those of you who just joined us or who forgot, Pro Bono Students Canada is the largest national volunteer organization that provides free legal services in the form of public legal education, client intake and assistance, and legal research and writing. So, I'm, in addition to being a volunteer for the Hearsay podcast, I'm also the events coordinator this year. And that's something that's really different and difficult for me as someone who's never really planned events outside of, small friend gatherings. So like last Tuesday, for example, I had to pull together this public interest career panel, which is essentially this event that we host annually, and that's in collaboration with our school's career and professional development office. And we invited speakers from legal organizations that specialize in public interest law, which is a huge area in itself. So anything to do from human rights to like international environmental activists, and all things that are public, that the public would be interested in, is considered public interest law. So I had professionals come from all across Alberta to come and speak to the students about their career in public interest law and to just, network. And after 2 whole years of the pandemic, stunting our in-person events, it was really nice to see everyone come together in person and just have this really nice conversation about, the potential career paths that these students can take. So, being the events coordinator has let me learn about new social skills, what is important to include in sending out invitation emails. Things like parking is actually pretty important, and I forgot to put that in my emails. So the things you learn, But taking a step back, we thought it'd be a good idea for you guys to learn more about the Hearsay podcast, about what we do and what the production process looks like. So Amanda and I are project leaders this year, and what it means is that, like she mentioned earlier, it's a managerial role. So we oversee the entire process. We did do a lot of the work for the first semester. So we had we essentially produced the podcast for September to January, just because we had so much content. But we currently oversee 7 other student volunteers, all our first years, and are amazing at what they're doing right now. And yeah, we just make sure, are they researching correctly? Do they know where to look? What legal content are they going to produce? And they were able to come into CJSW and learn a lot about the production and tech side of the process. So we have our production coordinator, our podcast coordinator, to thank for that.
Thank you, Kamo.
And, again, we wouldn't be able to do that without CJSW's help. So here's another pitch for you to donate to cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 during this week of the funding drive. We end this Friday at 6 p.m. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to do any of this without CJSW, and our first years, as well as we, are now trained in producing things, in using the software, in trying to come up with interview questions and how to network and which professionals we're reaching out to. And this entire process is just something that we're now overseeing instead of doing, which is both challenging and kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I constantly compare my current role with the role I had last year as a volunteer. And, some of them overlap, but, some of them are obviously different because we are in a more, overseeing managerial role. But the process of creating a podcast is still the same. And I actually like the current position a little bit more in the sense that I get to see the full picture. I get to see where it begins and where it ends from, and where it starts is this brainstorming. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to talk about in September? What do we want to talk about in October to November? What are some of the topics that the public, who's our target demographic and who are listening to this lovely podcast and CJSW, what would they might be interested in, as well as what are we personally interested in talking about? And I definitely, the longer I do this, the more ideas just bloom. And I'm really sad.
Just like our broadcast in blue.
Exactly. And I'm already kind of sad that when I graduate, I can't do this anymore.
You mean you don't want to start your own podcast?
Oh, that's so much work. If Kamal, our lovely podcast coordinator, is with us, maybe. But yeah, we start with the research side, and we, Emily and I, we created the September to January episodes, and I think when we created those, I focused more on the research side of creating the podcast because I don't have I'm not really tech savvy. So I contribute by doing research, and I really like it, actually. I get the opportunity to research and learn about so many areas of law that I find to be important to the public, as well as just purely fascinating to me. Like, for example, starting November to January, we have a 3-part episode on jury duty in Alberta and Canada. And I find that to be such a fascinating topic because, like, jury duty is open to members of the public. Like, you can get a mail tomorrow saying, hey, you were called to do jury duty. And if I got that before starting law school, I wouldn't really know what would be happening to me. What is jury duty? Why am I called? What happens if I can't go? What happens if I do end up going? Like, what am I getting involved with? Am I getting compensated? And especially, what if people around me who can't really speak English, who are immigrants, or who face financial difficulty, so they just don't have enough legal resources to navigate this area. Like, what can they do? These are, I find, to be very important questions that I, truthfully didn't really think about before, starting this episode. And thankfully this podcast and this gives me an opportunity to think about those questions. And quick pitch to our, about our November to January episodes. Again, 3-part episode on jury duty in Alberta and Canada. And I'm so excited for those episodes to air. We interviewed a legal counsel in Alberta Court of King's Bench for our November episode, talking about, well, what is jury duty, the foundations of it? Can you get called? What happens if you get called? The procedure and the logistical aspects of it. And in December and for January, we interviewed a criminal defense lawyer, Jennifer Rutan. Brilliant criminal defense lawyer. So succinct and just beautiful in her interview, as well as Justice David Gates, right? Scary at times because of how smart and intelligent he is.
Terrifyingly intelligent.
Exactly. Yeah. And in those episodes we asked questions, more philosophical questions about, why does jury duty exist? Why is it the way it is? Should it be the way it is? What are some of the issues that the Canadian jury system is facing at the moment? And so many other more questions that we were very interested in asking.
Mm-hmm. And we think it's a great opportunity for listeners of the public and of CJSW to just tune in. And even if you can't listen to them live when they're being, put on air, you can always listen to them on the CJSW.com website for Hearsay. But it's an amazing resource for the public to just listen in on different areas of the law and different legal topics, and just kind of getting a peek into legal education. Like, these are the things that sometimes law schools don't even talk about. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to just explore all these different sides of the law and just to probe someone's mind. Someone who's been in the industry for many, many years and who has amazing expertise on it. So I don't know. I think it'd be such a shame if you didn't tune in, just because there's just so much free information that you have access to. But, my part of this project is essentially to just edit. So since Amanda does a lot of the legal research of it, I do a lot of the editing. So I take all of the audio files that we have, the raw recordings, and then I just put them into the software that we use and, cut out any of the cut out any awkward silences, and just make sure that you get the fully succinct version of the interview so listeners can get the entirety of the content that we had in the best way possible. And
CJSW's 2022 Broadcast in Bloom funding drive is taking place now until October 28th. Join the community who makes the Broadcast in Bloom blossom all year long. Help us pollinate the airwaves to keep the experience growing. Call 403-220-5000 or head to cjsw.com/donate to make your pledge now. That's 403-220-5000. or head to cjsw.com/donate.
Welcome back, everyone, to Meeting the People Behind the Hearsay podcast on CJSW's 2022 funding drive, Broadcast in Bloom. With the essential nourishment from our donors, listeners, volunteers, and partners, CJSW is cultivating a community garden where everyone is welcome. Without CJSW, the Hearsay podcast wouldn't be able to blossom and deliver legal educational podcasts to the public. So please donate. Every little bit helps. You can donate through cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 during this funding drive week. The drive wraps up this Friday, October 28th at 6 p.m.
So we're going to quickly get a little personal here, but, not everything comes with easy. Nothing really comes easily. But, Amanda, do you have any problems or struggles that you had since starting law school?
Oh, definitely. So for me, I don't think entering law school has created completely new problems, but instead I can definitely talk about time management because there are just so many things on my plate. Stress management and just multitasking and just figuring out like how I can manage my time in the day, throughout the week, and throughout the year. As well as I started thinking about like what is it like to be a good lawyer? What is it like to be a happy lawyer? As I started taking ethics and asking these lifelong questions.
So where do you think our listeners can go to if they would like to receive legal aid?
So the first option is to find a lawyer. You can ask around your family or friends for recommendations. You can also contact the Lawyer Referral Service, which is a service run by the Law Society of Alberta. Again, it's called the Lawyer Referral Service. There are also many community organizations and courthouse services that provide legal help for free or at a reduced cost. A platform called Law Central Alberta provides a list of legal services in your area in Alberta. Again, it's called Law Central Alberta. Some examples of organizations providing legal services for free or at a reduced cost include Calgary Legal Guidance, Student Legal Guidance at the University of Calgary, as well as Legal Aid Alberta. And please keep in mind that there are usually income limits for accessing free legal help. This means that you must make less than a certain income to be eligible to receive free legal help. Each organization has its own rules, so please check with each service. And that's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this interesting or at least informative. And if you're interested in learning more about various areas of law, please stay tuned to our upcoming episodes. As I've pitched earlier, we have an exciting lineup of topics. We have jury duty, impact of the death of the Queen in Canadian international law, legal aid in Alberta, and NATO and Arctic resources. And if you're super keen on learning more about the law, University of Calgary Law Faculty will welcome you with open arms.
And a huge final thank you to CJSW for inviting us to broadcast today. The Hearsay podcast wouldn't be able to blossom and deliver legal educational podcasts to the public without the support of the station. With an update, our station total is now at $91,981. We're really close to the $100,000 mark. You guys can do it. Thank you to our 16 donors who at this time have donated a total of $608. Round of applause. So those of you who wish to continue donating or would like to donate, please go to cjsw.com/donate or call 403-220-5000 during this funding drive week. The drive wraps up this Friday, October 28th at 6 p.m. Thank you for joining us. We are Amanda and Emily from the Hearsay podcast, coming to you live at CJSW.
CJSW's 2020